I knew things were headed in the direction of expansion when the North Carolina Board of Trustees released that statement. That statement was put out for one reason and one reason only. They knew that NC State had decided to change their opinion and break away from the little voting block that they seem to have had going into this entire thing. The first go round when they did the straw poll and the votes and everything else. So once that statement went out, I went, yep, NC State's changed their mind. This call is going to happen Friday morning, and we're going to have Cal, Stanford, and SMU join the league. So I guess the best way to go about this, and on the drive back yesterday, I wrote like notes on notes on notes. I have 3 pages of notes on this because there's a lot to dissect on this. So I feel like we can start ultimately with the why I was wrong on all of this. We're going all the way back to, I went back and looked on July 17th, we did a show, and I said that major realignment was dead. And the reason why I felt that major realignment was dead was that ESPN couldn't even pony up the cash to give the SEC a 9th conference game. Keep in mind, the reason why the SEC is sticking with 8 conference games is because it's their last leverage chip with their broadcast partner to extract more money in their deal, which they just re-upped, by the way. But the additions of Texas and Oklahoma make you go, well, you got to play more conference games. Well, yes, you're right, but they're not going to do it for free.
Yeah, it wasn't negotiated.
They know that that's the value of the SEC. So in order to use it, they're going to hold that back. And ESPN went, yeah, guys, we're budgeted for y'all, but we're not budgeted for this, especially when you have other television negotiations coming down the line for Disney. And also, if you read the room, you understand that Disney is going through a lot of belt tightening right now from layoffs and everything else. So that, to me, indicated, yeah, you know what? If there's no money, then we're not really going to see a lot of shifts. But here's why I got that wrong. And this is going to be a theme of this conversation, I gave too much faith to those in positions of leadership to do their freaking job. And this gets to George Kliavkoff, who is the commissioner of the Pac-2 now, or whatever we're going to call it, when they refused to take the money that was available to them post UCLA Southern Cal and get with ESPN. They looked at the number and said, no, we're worth more than that. Y'all are going to find out real quick in the next 5 years, you're not worth what you think you're worth when the money isn't cheap anymore for these cable distributors and for these broadcast networks. The money is no longer cheap and the business is being disrupted, okay? So when they said no, and they went to Apple, and Apple went, hey, we can hit these escalators and maybe you can get to this amount. That's when everything fell apart. That's what I did not account for. And that's why we're ultimately here with more disruption in North Carolina, and the ACC adding Stanford, Cal, and SMU. That's why we're here. Now, the question is, why did NC State go from a no to a yes, Joe? Why did Randy Woodson, the chancellor at NC State, go from, yeah, you know what, we're on the same page, I don't like this idea, to, yep, we're going to go ahead and go with this, and we are going to set in motion what ultimately will be the destruction of the ACC by around 2030, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's some flawed thinking in here. And that is, first of all, let's take a short-term solution, even though we already have the answer to the long-term problem in our grant of rights.
Yeah.
Okay. So taking the short-term solution means by adding these 3 schools, Stanford, Cal, and SMU, there is in their contract, speaking of contracts, in there, which no one gets to see, by the way, which is total and complete bullshit, that these public schools are in contracts and the contracts aren't made public. Okay. Point number 1 here.
Yeah.
In their contract, it says, hey, when you add new members, we will pay you the current value, the average value of the current members.
Yeah.
So by adding Stanford, Cal, SMU, you're adding, in theory, let's just say $90 million to the pot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, it's actually not in theory. And we can get into these numbers a little bit more. The numbers vary. Ross Ellinger reports 75 million.
Okay.
I've heard 90 million as well. But based on those reports, they're going to be taking a percentage of that money.
So you're adding in the short term,
you're adding money.
You're adding money because of the contract, but because of ESPN.
We'll get into that a little bit more later.
So now you're adding schools for that. Now you're not looking at the quality of those football programs. You're just saying, by adding these schools, we're doing this. Mm-hmm. Okay. Number 1, that's a short-term solution. Number 2, now you're trying to convince yourself to play 4D chess. And when we talked to John Curry, he was hinting at this, in that, do we have to make a move in order to do what's best for us? long term. That thinking now has led us to, apparently and reportedly, these schools are thinking that Florida State and Clemson are going to leave the ACC.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I don't know what they think their timetable is, but they're arguing. The argument here is that Florida State and Clemson specifically are going to leave the ACC sooner rather than later. And by adding Stanford and Cal and SMU for free, we're now adding Power 5 schools instead of, whenever Florida State and Clemson leave, adding Group of 5 schools.
Sure.
This thinking,
it's backfilling,
is so backwards. This thinking is so myopic. This thinking is ultimately what is going to be the end of the ACC. You're adding schools because you're counting on your two major brands leaving. And you somehow think that Cal, which averages 41, this is a 5-year average attendance, 41,172. You think Stanford, 5-year average attendance, 40,417, and SMU double checks, puts glasses on, 5-year average, 21,969.
Yeah.
You somehow think adding these 3 brands and these schools in football is going to somehow save you and offset the exit of Clemson and Florida State. That's what you're saying right now.
It's too little, too late.
So you're getting some money in the short term, and you think you're acting a step ahead. Right behind me, I have a list of the top 25. Look at that. Well, of course. Why are we adding these schools? Well, Stanford's number 3, Cal's number 20. We're adding 2 top 25 schools. What's the problem, Julio? This is the president's thinking right here. This top 25 is the U.S. News and World Report ranking of national universities. Okay, the presidents who made this decision are making this decision based on a Jedi mind trick from Jack Swarbrick, which is really not how the decision was made. But these schools, Stanford and Cal, they're too great to let them fail. They're too great of academic institutions. And the thought process of a Wake Forest, the thought process of a Duke, the thought process of a Boston College is, well, if we leave them behind, what's going to happen to us when somebody needs to save us? I've got news for you that no one is buying tickets based on the U.S. News and World Report. Again, those numbers for Cal, Stanford, and SMU would be behind all Big Ten and behind all SEC teams not named Vanderbilt. Okay. And here are the teams they're ahead of in the Big Ten currently. And you tell me if this is the company you want to keep. Rutgers, Illinois, Maryland, Northwestern.
Right.
You just basically added the equivalent of Northwestern.
Do you know what
Vanderbilt?
Do you know what those schools?
How does that help you?
Do you know what those schools behind you are in? Not just the top 25. You know what all those schools are in?
Those schools are in the AAU.
You know who's not in the AAU
right now?
Right now?
Oh, NC State is not in the AAU.
You know who's gonna be in the AAU when this is all said and done?
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't do this unless you know that Stanford and Cal in the negotiation to flip your vote. I hope Randy Woodson would do this. If you're a high level research institution, because you got to remember, presidents, chancellors are not just about sports. They're also about the academics, as you sarcastically pointed out. But it's real to them.
Right.
It's real to them. And NC State, as a research institution and trying to better their situation as a school, prides itself on their research. They're not in that group of the American, what is it? The Association of American Universities or whatever it is. NC State's not in that group. Stanford and Cal are. And if you're negotiating to flip from a no to a yes, you better get something in return that goes beyond just the money. And Randy Woodson, I'm guessing, probably has a little bit of a, like, hey, we got some votes for this? Because remember, it's like Augusta. You got to be invited in, right? So at least that's my understanding of how the AAU works. I'm no academic. So keep that in mind. Don't be surprised when NC State here in the future gets included into the AAU. Now, I know that a lot of NC State fans have pointed out, well, why would we pair up with UNC? What makes you think that they're going to help us out in whatever is next? I don't disagree with that. And I do not disagree with this, because what have we seen every single time? What have we seen every single time in college athletics? Every time the alliance, I looked him in the eye, Joe. in the eye. And if we can't have an understanding as men, what are we doing here? So I don't blame NC State fans for being skeptical to the idea, which gets to a larger point and why, after thinking about it while driving 7 hours through Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia, I've actually kind of come around on NC State when it comes to this. You're going to shake your head. I understand that, and that's fine. I don't mind disagreeing on this particular topic because you have to detach yourself about what's going on next. What will be next? This idea. So I keep getting pointed out. Well, Virginia Tech, the politics. Virginia Tech's in this league because of the politics of Virginia.
The governor, yeah.
That was in 2003. That was a different time. That's when conferences actually meant something. Conferences are not going to mean anything in the next 5 to 10 years because we're headed to a super league. So if you think that you don't have a table in the super league, and why would NC State think that they have a seat at the table at the super league? Come on now. Let's be real. If we're bumping out to 40 teams, do you really think that NC State's going to be included in that group as a brand? I don't think so. I really don't. So if you don't think that you're going to be making it to the next round, you have to better position yourself on what's going to be remaining, okay? So I can see where NC State goes with this. Plus, there's you can't trust North Carolina. You can't trust the politics of today. I'm not disagreeing with the idea that if you were going to try to make a move to whatever is next, which will be basically an AFC, NFC, an American League, National League of college football, right? If you think that's going to be the case, well, then yes, you vote with UNC and you lean on the political leverage you have in this state, all right? Because what do we know? North Carolina might be the big brand in North Carolina, but behind the scenes at the state level, at the NCGA, state has leverage. And you could work that if you were desirous to go into what's next. And I don't think they are. I think they're trying to prepare themselves for the more regional aspect of what's going to happen next, and better positioning yourself for what is not in that power, in that super league. That's my opinion on this.
You don't have to trust North Carolina.
It's fair.
You need to trust the whole entire political process.
Yeah.
And I think the more allies that you have, the better off you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
This is the equivalent of the phrase making a deal with the blonde-haired family in Game of Thrones.
Oh, the Lannisters?
The Lannisters. Okay.
They always pay their debts.
The wolf's going to come back for you here because all you did was you don't even need someone slitting your throat at the wedding. You just slit your own throat.
Yeah, that's fair.
By double crossing Carolina, all you've done is say to them, we just double crossed you. You're now free to leave us in the future. That's what this decision means.
But who knows where North Carolina is going to be, by the way? That's the other thing,
North Carolina will ultimately end up in the Big Ten.
Okay.
Ultimately.
Does NC State want to be in the Big Ten?
I don't know, but North Carolina, you want allies. You don't want enemies.
Fair.
This is literally like just watch Top Gun. Okay.
Oh, this is historic. It's a historic breakaway.
Don't leave your wingman. Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty simple stuff here. So that part of it is what's disappointing for NC State.
All right.
Trusting, it's not about trusting UNC. It's about playing the game the right way.
So let's close this conversation on the business, shall we?
Well, I mean, there's more to this.
Well, there is. There is
Swarbrick as well in Notre Dame as well. Because do you know how rich people make their money?
Oh, I'll get to that.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll get to Notre Dame here because I feel like that's where this is all headed. Let's go through some business stuff.
I think that's where the mind trick comes. Our friend Scott Dupree had said to me,
"Yeah,
why are we letting Duke off the hook? Like you're mad at State, but why are you letting Duke off the hook?"
Because Duke knows. They know.
I think Duke will be in the Big Ten with Carolina.
But what is the Big Ten going to be? That's the question. That's the larger point that I'm getting at.
I can't tell you what that's going to be.
We don't know what. I keep getting back to what you think of conferences is 20-year-old thinking because where we're headed next. I mean, not to put on the metallic shades and go, Doc Brown on you. Where we're going, we don't need conferences, Joe. All right, so the ACC and ESPN has a deal that is pro rata, okay? Meaning that new schools enter into the grant of rights. Stanford, Cal, SMU are going to enter into these grant of rights through 2036 like everybody else. And due to their tier one money from TV, they're going to get roughly $25 million, maybe a little bit more, but for the sake of this conversation, $25 million. But as we know, Cal and Stanford are going to be taking a discount rate, and SMU is basically free through the first run of this. So based on reports, the money's going to be split between a success ratio and share. So if Cal and Stanford are going to take 30%, as has been reported, and SMU is free, that frees up about $60 million to split up. Ross Dellinger says that 25 to 30 from Yahoo Sports. He says 25 to 30 million is going to be paid for football specific success. So like theoretically, we don't know the exact numbers. If you win the ACC championship and you play for a national championship, you'll get $10 million, right? They can split it any number of ways. So that leaves for an equal share at best around $3 million. So NC State voted yes too, because I don't think NC State's going to be winning an ACC championship. I don't think NC State's going to be winning a national championship. So essentially what you're settling for by voting yes is AAU membership, which is important, and $3 million per.
Why is the AAU membership important?
Because it's academics, dude. They care about this stuff. The Big Ten talks about it. They talk about this stuff. So even if you hit your success goals, what are we really doing here? You're not really closing the gap. But it gets to your point with Clemson, right? Like, man, if we're going to do this, we know we're going to win. So fine, we'll take the money. So Florida State, maybe they will. I have no idea. But I've gotten this response from some people. Not to go full truth bombs on you, but it's like, but Joe, the ACC network. This is where you have things wrong. What happened over the weekend, Joe, for college football fans? If you were a Charter Spectrum subscriber, what happened this weekend?
Not able to watch on ESPN.
Yeah. About just under a quarter of ESPN Disney's homes went away, blacked out, because they pulled those channels in this dispute over carriage fees for ESPN and Charter Spectrum. So this is where things start getting really, really important. 2022 S&P Kagan report says 42 million homes for the ACC network. Robert over at Sports TV Ratings, good Twitter account if you want to follow this nerdy stuff, has said that ACC is getting around 75 cents per subscriber. But what just happened? They just took a lot of these homes out of the equation, so they're not going to be making that money. They pulled them. They're not making subscriber fees on that. So when people bring up, well, the ACC network is going to be on in the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose area. That's the number 10 TV market in the country. Dallas-Fort Worth, which might be a way station for Olympic sports as they play neutral site games to save money. Dallas-Fort Worth is a number 5 TV market. But what's it to you when you're not even going to be on? The Pac-12 issues, to get back to the start of this conversation, we're there because there was little desire for distributors to pick up the Pac-12 network. And Disney is losing leverage as more and more people cut the cord. And they're preparing to go direct to consumer. The conventional wisdom is in about 3 years. They're in about 70 million homes right now if they were on every cable network, not pulled on Charter Spectrum. But the thought is when they get to about 50 million, which some people project will be in about 3 years, they're going to go direct to consumer. So if you don't believe me, again, just look at what's happening with Charter Spectrum. This is not like previous disputes, because I've had some people say, oh, look at that, yet another carriage dispute between a distributor cable company and Disney. These always get resolved. Yes, but things are different now as people continue to cut the cord. And you have the executives of Charter openly saying on calls, we are looking to completely change this business because it doesn't make sense for us anymore. This is not something we make buku bucks on. You know what they make money on? Internet, broadband, other services, not necessarily the cable bundle. Doesn't make as much money as possible. So distributors already did this with regional sports networks. They essentially put regional sports networks like Bally into bankruptcy because they said, we can live without you. And look at that. They can. They've shown you they can live without regional sports networks. So now they're thinking, can we live without ESPN? Can we live without the $10 we got to pass down to our customers who are leaving for other services? Distributors want to transform the businesses. Isn't this the first step? If you think Charter Spectrum is the only thing that's going on, Comcast will be in the same position next year. And you don't think Comcast is watching what's going on here going, Disney bleeds? Good. That means we can try to do this. So this gets to how social media reaction happened over the weekend, Joe, and you and I usually have arguments about this. You'd be shocked how much people can live without sports. If you're on Twitter, you're like, I am leaving Spectrum. How can you? You just lost a customer. Buddy, you were one of the last ones because people have already been leaving, not because of sports. They've been leaving because of sports, because their cable system has become too expensive. And again, you'll be shocked to find out just how people will move on without sports in their lives, especially if you're just a casual person who cares about the NFL, which is readily available just about everywhere. you'll be just fine.
Which gets back to our assumption that the TV money is just going to continue to go up and up and up and up and up forever.
So ESPN is raising fees to essentially offset these subscriber losses. That's why they keep raising the money, because they have to maintain what they've been making.
Doesn't that get back to the grant of rights, though? Doesn't that get back to the value of the grant of rights?
Yes.
Which gets back to, you panicked by adding 3 schools with no football value because you're assuming that Florida State and Clemson are going somewhere.
Right.
That's a panic move.
Right.
So you're slightly confusing me with your argument. Are you saying this was a good move?
No. I'm leading to why this was a terrible move.
Okay.
Because I've seen people...
Because this doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense. So
I'm taking the political and the emotional part out of it with NC State, okay?
No, and I'm looking at it from a financial point of view.
We'll take all that out. That was, in my opinion, that was a dumb move by NC State.
So to wrap,
fair enough.
To wrap where these things are going, I've been kind of upset at the way that national college media people get wowed by big shiny numbers. Like, oh, they're adding $75 million to the pool. Yeah, but do a little homework, do a little math, understand why that $75 million isn't taking you as far as you think it's going to go. Okay.
Do you know when I take out a loan, the most specific thing that I ask them to do is, don't tell me what I'm paying back.
Yes.
Do you know what the ACC did here? They got the answer. The answer, what they're paying back is, it's the future of the league. That's what this cost them.
And that's why I'm always going to rip this move, because it wasn't proactive. But this is where I think you and I align, and why, if I sounded confusing, I was laying out where we were with cable to understand why this was a terrible move. And what you're laying out is the actual benefit of the length of, and we've been critical of that length, but it actually,
there is a benefit.
Curse is a gift and a curse. So 2 summers now, Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, has wanted status quo. 2 years ago, it was gated communities, the alliance. It's bad for college athletics if we just put up these walls and we don't all work kumbaya, arm in arm about college athletics. Okay. What did he talk about last summer? He gave credit to an unnamed president when he quoted this president by saying, what did he say back in July? Are we chasing dollar amounts or are we chasing success? They don't have to be, one or the other type of thing, which is weird because did Florida State beat LSU with less money? How did that happen?
I don't know.
How did that happen?
They looked really good to me.
Weird. I'm really confused because I've been told that Florida State cannot compete.
I was actually going to absolve Jim in all of this until you just said that.
Absolutely not. Look, man, I have defended Jim Phillips as much as I can. But in this particular situation, he failed. Straight up failed for 2 summers of Pollyanna-ish talk about the NCAA and its mission. You got to go one way, stick with it. Either you're about that life or you're not. So here's where they made the mistake, and here's where there was a failure of leadership. The ACC had time. And I just laid out why, you just laid out why, because of the contract. But if the landscape is changing, you got to read the room. You got to read the room understanding that you don't want to upset your cable partner in ESPN Disney. Because, last time I checked, they weren't really budgeting for this extra $90 million that's coming up over the next 2 years. They've been budgeting for less. So you just put them in a bad spot. And then by not being proactive, you put yourself in a bad spot by adding $90 million for scraps. Again, scraps. So here's what the ACC should have done. When the Big Ten made the move for UCLA and Southern Cal, you should have started the plan then. You had to start understanding, where are these dominoes going to fall? What are we going to do to stay ahead of this? For as much as John Swofford gets ripped for being the guy who killed the league in the original amount of expansion, John Swofford knew where things were going. We can quibble about the teams that he added, but he knew where things were going. And that's why at the time, adding cable homes in big Northeastern markets was important to get to this point. What did Jim Phillips do? Did Jim Phillips think about any of this stuff? Honestly, did he think about any of this stuff?
Here's what I think happened. And this is why I was slightly going to absolve Phillips.
No.
I was willing to, at least. Let's put aside his belief in, which I do believe.
Oh, he believes what he says.
His belief is about the athletes and their opportunity. Okay, he uses the term I don't agree with, but he says they have an opportunity. What you've done to non-revenue sports by adding these schools is doesn't help them.
And they'll tell you that it's fine because look at how these things go. I mean, we talked to John Curry about that. This
does not help them, straight up. You've put them in a bad situation now. So you don't believe in their well-being. So please stop telling me that you care about their mental health. You don't.
So go ahead.
Now, the thing I was willing to absolve him for is when he was hired, he was hired and they hired this cockamamie fish bait solutions. Okay.
Yeah.
Fish bait solutions, as they should have, their diligence probably was, let's go through the ESPN contract. Let's figure out a way for us to make more money.
Let's put it in movie theaters.
Well, I think what they did was they pointed out to the ACC, hey, it doesn't matter if you add 3 football brands that don't help you. It just matters that you add brands. That you add schools. So by adding these schools, we can get you an extra 75 to 90 million per year or with the addition. And I think he took that. He then, because remember, he's not the one who voted on this.
Mm-hmm.
He then takes this to the presidents and says, okay, you want to close the gap. Here's one way we can generate revenue. And probably there's a Carolina in there and there's a Clemson and Florida State that says, hold up. Okay, we already have enough schools in this conference that don't care about football or don't prioritize football. We don't need to add 3 more. Those were the 3 schools that voted no. The other schools said, short-term solution sounds good to me.
But this you're talking about now. This is stuff that should have happened last summer. And the minute Colorado decided to leave for the Big 12 after the Pac-12 couldn't secure a TV deal, that's when whatever you had been working on.
But there's where your levels come to, because now those presidents go, seriously, I'm being serious right now. Those presidents go, Arizona State.
But that's
Arizona. No. I don't want to add those types of schools.
This is
I want Stanford and Cal.
You can add those schools too. Once you get to 18, dude, what's 20? Once you get to 18,
I'm just telling you the
22?
mentality.
Right.
Their mentality is those schools aren't good enough.
And that's where as a commissioner of a conference, you have to tell them this is why this works. That is your freaking job. I'm sorry. That's your job as a commissioner of a conference.
But you also hired
thinking 3 steps ahead, which is not what happened here. And that's where the mistake is. And that's why they're left with the scraps. You should have acted and told those schools to get over themselves and leverage the contract. Fish bait solutions. How much do you think they're getting paid? Now I'm fired up. How much do you think they're being paid?
A lot.
How much do you think they could have paid us?
A fraction.
A fraction of what they're paying Fish Bait Solutions to say, look at your ESPN contract. And if you're going to screw ESPN by adding these schools, then let's really make it worth their while. Let's make it worth our. I'm not going to fault the ACC for leveraging their contract. That's in their contract to do this pro rata stuff. But if you're going to do it, if you're going to tick off your partner, you might as well do it in a way that ultimately makes sense.
Go get West Virginia.
Go get
ECU,
get some
App
freaking
State,
schools, man.
Go get UCF.
Or think big. Let's go back to the Swafford stuff. Let's go back to pods. Why wouldn't you go back to the alliance thought? Because remember, a Pac-12,
they could have had a West Coast pod.
Pac-12 ACC alliance and television scheduling and the ACC network stuff has been kicked around for the last 2 years. At that point, you go, well, screw it. If Colorado's leaving for the Big 12, then let's just do this thing before it fully breaks up. And then you're left with 3 schools that aren't really adding anything.
You know where Phillips worked before he came here? Was Northwestern. Do you know the only school in the top 25 from the Big 10 in the U.S. News World Report, top 25 from the Big 10?
Yeah.
Northwestern.
Okay.
These guys, and I'm just saying to you, the level that they think at,
this is where Woodson comes in,
is a total disconnect from the level that most people who either follow sports or follow the money just say. And I just want to get back to Notre Dame real quick because of the mind trick here.
Yes.
By
the way, where did he work?
Swarbrick?
No, Phillips.
Oh, Notre Dame. He's from Notre Dame.
They're all protecting Notre Dame because in this equation, by the way, you tell Notre Dame after 2020, when all these things are going on, hey guys, either you're going to join what we're doing here or we are absolving this contract because the conference is changing. But they don't have the balls to do this stuff. Or either they don't have the balls or their brain is poisoned by all this stuff with academics. Anyway, I'm done.
Rich people make money off of their money.
Yes. The money circulates.
Rich people make money off of their money. Notre Dame's money that they make from the ACC deal is their tip money.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Think about that. And it's more significant than you think it is. The money they make off of the ACC is their tip money. Well, what just went up with the addition of Stanford, Cal, and SMU? Because we can't leave these fine institutions. That's a direct quote from Jack Swarbrick. Their cut of the ACC now goes up by adding these 3 terrible football brands. Also, one of those terrible football brands just so happens to be on Notre Dame's schedule on an annual basis, which means one of the schools in the ACC now gets to play Notre Dame fewer times in their cycle. Do you know what that means? Because on the school level, NC State's going to sell more season tickets this year since, let me think of what year it was. Oh, 2016, the last time Notre Dame came to Raleigh.
Yeah.
All of these schools that sell season tickets at a high rate because of Notre Dame. Well, you just got one fewer home game with Notre Dame on a 4-year basis. So congratulations to what you did and to help yourself. Rich people make money off of other people's money. That's what Notre Dame's doing here. That's the Jedi mind trick that Notre Dame pulled.